And we're live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is Brave New History, and we're here with Gnostic. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
Yep, absolutely. And so today we're talking about Messalians. Who are they? Right? So probably we don't know. So you've come to the right place because that's what we're talking about. So
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
let's just begin then, I guess. And
Yep, there's not going to be any filler here. This is just straight to the good stuff here.
yeah, and Messalianism itself was a monastic movement which appeared in Mesopotamia and developed further in Syria during the last part of the 4th century. And name itself comes from the Syriac Msaliane, which itself the participle of the verb salla, to pray, the praying ones, basically. They were also known as Euchites in the Greek sources. Themselves they called as spirituals, pneumatikoi, and the poor, ebionim. And they believed that prayer was the only important thing, rejecting the sacraments of the church and the church authority. It was anti-clerical movement, one of the first and the biggest one, if we exclude the early Gnostics, of course. And Jerome had labeled Messalians as heretics of nearly all Syria in one of his refutations. And actually, the first testimony, first attestation we know about the Messalians comes from the Ephraim the Syrian, where he actually used this particular term, Saliane, from which stems this general term Messalians, the people who pray. And Ephraim himself provides little information other than just the manner of prayer that he considered to be very boisterous. The second in line was Epiphanius in his Panarion, and this is just the little short script from his book. There is interesting information that he describes that they actually place men and women at the same position and mixing together with the women, which was like big no-no for the already established orthodoxy, at least by the time of Epiphanius, late 4th century, and that they reject the possessions, which fairly brings them closer to what we know from this Judeo-Christian baptismal groups like Ebionites or Nazareans. Yes, and
So they were referred to as Ebionites. These guys.
they call themselves Ebionites, at least what we know from the patristic writers, that they report that they themselves would prefer this type of identification.
Could they be the Ebionites?
Well, it's speculative, but well, at least some notion, if we really do believe in the accounts of the patristic writers, like rejecting the possession, the at least same privilege of men and women in the community.
So yeah, you wonder, is that where you're going? Are you going to discuss that, like the Christian Ebionites? That if there's any kind of relationship?
No, oh, actually, I'm just gonna connect them to some Quranic verses, and this is purely academic scholarship. It's not my somehow developments. It's from Carlos Segovia paper in his academia page. So yeah, and this is the Timothy of Constantinople account, very unheard patristic writer of the late 7th century, and he actually writes in detail what happened in the Synod of Constantinople, which was raised against the heresy, which started getting attention on the highest levels at this time. What it would be the early 5th century, before the Council of Ephesus, and in his condemnation, he wrote that Messalians claim that after achieving apatheia, they can see the future and discern the invisible powers. Interesting that they would jump and imagine that the demons pretending to shoot with their fingers, like.
So what's that? Like they would like do finger guns at devils?
Yeah, maybe, but you can. I mean, it's not connected to the demons, but in Buddhism there is this dancing practice among the monks when they would just use specific styles of particular animal and try to mimic the animal. But I don't know, it's far-fetched to make such a connection, but I think there's something to it, maybe some truth to it. Yeah, and also he states that they believe that alms should be given only to themselves. But yeah, whether that is just simply a slander from the Timothy side or what was really the case.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of alms if it's just to yourself. So that might be a polemic.
Yeah, but you can see the same type of thing in Manichaeism, for example. And that's why I think they were often confused between each other, Messalians and Manichaeans, at least in Northern Africa. That there is a distinction between monkhood and laity supports the monks with a shelter and with a food. So, and actually there's a lot of sort of inner debates within Manichaean community preserved in Kephalaion, and the chapters, what is called the sort of a hadith tradition within Manichaean writings, where it discuss almost sort of conflicts between this laity and monkhood, when the monkhood became too bratty, when they just start demanding more than its due. So maybe it could happen in Messalian community, but it could be a polemic. Like, come on, it's just Christian apologists write about the other group. Yeah, and these points were later on reiterated by the John of Damascus, who was famous also refuting Islam as the Arian heresy. And that's, for some reason, just doubled the slide, but. And this is actually what's in the Quran, and there is a paper of Carlos Segovia I suggest to read if you are interested in this connection, called Reimagining the Early Islam. And he basically tries to show that in several passages and Meccan verses we can demonstrate a shared belief between the than the Messalians and Quranic authors on importance and benefits of prayer. And the first category portrays the benefits of nightly prayer, as you can see in this particular verse from the Quran. And in the night do arise for a prayer. Of course, the problem that we must follow mostly the opposite etymologies, because it's tahajjud is the hapos, it's the hapax legomenon, the word which occurs only once in the Quran. And as far as I know, you won't find anything familiar in other Semitic languages with this particular root, hajada. But if we really do agree, then there is a strong case of connection, at least between this theology presented in this verse and the Messalianism. That you need to pray at night, arise at night, and pray additionally. It may be that your Lord will raise you to a praised position, maqaman mahmudan, which is interesting, right? Because that's actually how it must be when we are dealing with a passive participle from hamada in Arabic, mahmud, but not the mahmad, as it was reported by the contemporary non-Muslim sources about the name of the Muhammad himself. But let's not digress further. And this is another point with which Carlos Segovia brings, the Surah 73. I'm not gonna delve deep into the Arabic because that would be like, I guess, another lecture. The surah itself called Muzammil, and this Zamala, as far as I know, another hapax in the Quran, another one-comer, appears only once, and at least in the Syriac and Hebrew, it means the special knife for the circumcision. So this Muzammil would be an active participle. In that case, the one who performed most probably circumcision. But yeah, here we can see stay up through the night and remember your Lord in the verse 8. That the goal of the staying up is remembrance of God. Next point, the connection of the nightly prayer and continuous remembrance of God. وَإِذْكِرُوا اسْمَ رَبِّكَ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا. Remember the name at the evening, at the morning and at the evening. And same in the next verse, that it's almost like a synonym, this fasajjada with a fatahajjada, and you might think that maybe it's not the hapax, it just was a scribal mistake, and originally here where we can see fatahajjada, it was fatasajjada, which makes sense because it's almost like the same phrase, وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَسَجَّدَ وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَتَسَجَّدَ. So it would be just a similar notion. And in the night prostrate to him and glorify him all night long. Again, this importance of nightly prayers. And that was actually also the case in Manichaeanism, that the elect, this monk community, would often pray additionally at night times. Identification of the sinners in the afterlives as those who didn't pray in the earthly lives, and when it asked what actually bring you to the sakar, which oftenly translated as hell, hellish realm sometimes, but even In Syriac sources, in Hebrew, it just means the envy. It's some sort of envious hatred. So whether it's hell or a mental state's hard to ascertain. But when it asked to them, what bring you to this hell? They answer, we weren't amongst those who pray. Like another points of sort of a connection. And I did the importance of continuous remember of God on the nightly prayer in the name of, it's very similar to the previous point, to be honest. And remember the name of your Lord. Yeah, it just do replicate it for some reason, the same slide. Yeah, that's actually the case. The continuation, the whoever turns away from the remembers of Rahman, of the merciful, we allot him Satan as his companion. And this is the point of connection between the Messalians, because in some reports actually they believed in the idea that this continuous prayer removes this indwelling demons within yourself, that the Holy Spirit purifies you from the demonic influences through the prayer. And that's the implication of this particular chapter in the Quran, that if you turn away from this remembrance of God, then the Satan will be the companion. Shaitan.
Yeah, that's really interesting, being that exorcisms
Yeah,
were
sort of.
very big in early Christianity. That just like
Yeah.
daily baptism, uh, there were sects that believed in daily exorcism.
I think there's some sort of a ritual competition going on, because
Who could get
they
the devils out the most?
actually, yeah, and what practice is the right one, and I almost think that we're not dealing with some sort of a prayer in a sense, oh God, give me like strength or something, but we're dealing with sort of what we see in the Buddhism, mantras, repetitive
Oh,
invocations. And that's basically what is meant by dhikr in the Sufi tradition, right? or so often associated. Dhikr is just repetitive pronunciation of certain specific formulas within the Quran, names of God or certain prayers or some prayer compositions. And and I think some Christian movements made the importance that no, actually baptism is what is important, and this guy were against that kind of stuff, and because through baptism you are kind of introduced a specific church authority, and obviously for Byzantine Christianity, whether it's going to be Catholic or Eastern Orthodoxy, your salvation lies beneath the church. You're being redeemed through the church, and if you reject the church, you are in hell. That's why you need to bring this idea of kind of a succession of the authority to the Peter, and Peter became this rock upon the church, upon which the church is built. And maybe there was like a different practices were just competing with each other, I guess. Not to say that prayer wasn't part of the Byzantine Christianity, but it wasn't as important as we can see in this Messalian movement. Yeah, and this is another passage, right, in the Surah 108. Unfortunately, portion of the presentation was cut off, but what is stated that I decided not to bring it up at the first time because I disagree with that this is actually what is told, what is being told there. Anna ataynaka al-Kawthar, and this Kawthar became a very big controversy after the publication of Christoph Luxemburg work, where he connects the Arabic kathara with the Syriac kathara. The verb, he connects Arabic verb to the Syriac one. And in Arabic, kathara means something which in a big amount. Yeah, it's just the adjective of measure. Kathir would be big amount of something. Whilst in Syria, kathar means something which is done repeatedly. And Luxemburg translate this kauthar as the verbal noun from this Syriac root, which means persistence. So ana ataynaka kauthar would be, in that case, we have given you the persistence, not the abundance as it was usually translated. Fasali li rabbika wa anhar. So pray to your Lord and sacrifice. It's just the usual Sunni translation. Of course, it's based on the assumption that this fa in fasalli is used as the preposition and not part of the root word. Yes, because, well, the problem, of course, lies in the fact that this fasalli ends up with a lam. It doesn't actually ends up with a alif maksura, which would be accepted if we're really dealing with a root to pray, as it's translated, so pray. But it's not there, so it's probably just fasli, not fasali. Fasli is the word used extensively in the Quran to indicate the separation, and it's used for the judgment day, Yomul Fasli, day of separation. And that's why I think often you see even in Syriac that Farouk means the redeemer. Literally, it means the separator, divider. Yeah, Jesus the divider. Why? Because he separates the sheep from the goats. I think that's the most obvious conclusion. Yeah, and Farouk even in Syriac, Puraka would be the same as Arabic Faraka, to separate, to divide. So Fasli li Rabbika wa Anhar. And Anhar is not exactly sacrifices, to destroy something. And what is meant here that Fasli li Rabbika, that the separation or division is for your God or belongs to the God, and also to him belongs the Anhar, the destruction. But you can translate it as usually, and Shani'aka huwa al-abtar, and your enemy will be al-abtar, will be cut off. Often it's translated like that. But Carlos Segovia brings up this kind of a Luxemburgian paradigm, if we can call it like that, where we see that we can apply differently and translate it. We have given you perseverance following this Syriac pattern. So pray to your Lord and persist, as he translated. If we are, and that was the Luxemburg idea, that we're not dealing with the anhar, but with anjar, that the dot under the letter ha was removed later on by the scribes. And your opponent, indeed your opponent, in Shaniaka, and this Shania is both for Arabic and Syriac means the same enemy. And your enemy, هو الأبتر. And here we must assume that this Aptar is the what is called metathesis, when you are borrow from other language some word, but you change the position of certain letters. So originally it was tabar, not batar as in Arabic, and tabar in Syriac means to defeat. But I myself read it drastically different. I think that this Aptar is the transcription of Mandean, Abatur, which is one of the Mandean deities identified with a judging figure. It's like the, how is it, not the Sraosha, but in Zoroastrianism there's, I don't remember exactly the name, but there's, you can drive certain parallels, and Aptar most probably was just pronounced Abatur. That's why you have the definite article, Al Aptar. Otherwise, you wouldn't expect such things. Al indicates that we're dealing with either adjective or noun, not with a verb. Well, you can say as an adjective, but why using the definite article? Like, definite article means that it refers to something already, like, in convention of the authors. Yeah, but that's my reading. That's why. But you can definitely see the same idea in the Surah 43, like that. If you turn away from remembrance, then Shaitan will be your companion, and that's very similar to what we see in Messalians. And another critical point, of course, the usage of the active participle, and that's, I think, the strongest point, because the Arabic word musallina, it's literally the same as you see in the Syriac Msaliane. It's like letter for letter, basically. And you can read it as Messalians. What is most important, that Quran uses the word appears 3 times in the Quran, and in every instant, every each of these instances, word is used with a definite article. Like if it would be the general term, article would be dropped. So we already may assume that the authors refer to this actual Messalians. It's like an-Nasara, right, in the Quran. Nazareans, and not just simply the general term like helping people or something, because why would you use definite article? And here the first instance, woe to those who pray, basically woe to the Messalians, among which, or the one Messalians who are in their prayers are obeyed, or who are in their prayer are lazy, which seems to be a document criticizing this particular Messalian community who are lazy in their prayer. Another instance.
And what could that refer to, like being lazy in your prayers? Meaning,
Maybe skipping the night prayer, something like that, I guess. Because I think, well, it's very tough to just wake up and like what 2 a.m. for additional prayer, and then again go back to sleep. And and you can see it in Islam, like very often, especially in this early morning prayer. I witnessed it several times, at least with my aunt, who just gonna wake up in the night to pray, then again go to sleep. So that's very funny. That this kind of obsession of prayer could be easily explained by this type of groups which were before Islam. And yeah, the second mentioning of this Messalians, right? When touches him evil, he is distress. إذا مسحوا الشر جزوعا وإذا مسه الخير منعوعا. But when the evil touches him, he is like crying, but when touches him good, he is hoarding. Except إلى المصلين الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون. Except those who pray. This again, musallina, which again spelled with a definite article. You can translate it except those who pray, or maybe except Messalians, who are on their prayer constant. And the third instance, we already brought this up, that what brought you to such hatred, as I translated it differently, or what brought you to the Saqar, to this hell? They will answer, we weren't among those who pray, we weren't among the Messalians. And the Quranic verses mentioned emphasize the importance or honorific of the prayer. And yeah, I guess that's the last slide for today. So there is strong parallels, and thank for the recent academic scholarship, which points out to these parallels, especially with the Syriac tradition, which highly important to understand the text of the Quran, because there would be a lot of Aramaism in the Quranic text, and Syriac is just one of the many different dialects of Aramaic. And what is interesting, that later in history, the teachings of the Bogomils, right, which often associated as Gnostic heretics, right, in like more common, not mainstream, but in a common public understanding, they would actually would be identified by the church authority with Messalians. And I think by the fact that of the rejection of the church leadership, and you won't find anything about the church leadership in the Quran, about the importance following specific bishops, that you must attend to the specific churches. Nothing like that. I mean,
why is that?
Well, because Quran follows this anti-clerical sort of theology that you must not follow the church for the salvation. And broadly, most of the Gnostic would agree with this statement, except for the Manichaeans, I guess, because Manichaeans was the church. It was Manichaean church. Just because some Christian apologists thinks otherwise doesn't change the fact that it's the church with the bishops, with the crosses everywhere, where we do find at least these Manichaean communities. And some even documents of Manichaeans, you would even think that it's Manichaean writing. You would think that some Orthodox writings or something like that. But the Quran definitely follows this kind of a trend. I mean, you can say that in famous passage that that you must follow the God, or obey the God and obey the Prophet. What is called Utiullah wa Utiu Rasulihi, and his Prophet. And you can kind of say, well, obey the Prophet. Prophet means who? Means specific clergy which interpret what the Prophet said. And that's what would be the case and main argument for the Sunnis. And you see it everywhere today with the debates between the Sunnis and this Quran-only community, like Protestant movement within Islam. And Sunnis will bring up this passage, like, what the hell are you on about? Obey the Prophet. And, well, is it the church necessarily? Maybe we're dealing with this weird paraclete tradition that you must follow the specific divine authority, which might be just associated later on with the Imami Shiism, like this figure of Imam. Even in Sunni corpus, to be honest, this Abu Bakr, the first caliph, almost like this imami figure in Shiism. Of course,
Yeah.
Sunnis try to mitigate that because, well, it brings certain problems because, well, if the Shias had the same thing about Ali, then, well, you just basically declared Ali to be a sort of an apostate, or not apostate, but at least competitor with Abu Bakr. And that's big no in Sunnism. No enmity between the Sahabis or the followers of Muhammad. So
Interesting. No,
they were.
it's not controversial, right? I thought, like, wasn't there a war between Ali and Abu Bakr?
It was a war between Ali and the third caliph, Uthman. At least not. It's not clear that it was a war, but at least from Shia perspective, definitely was a war. Ali just hired some guys and they killed Abu Bakr. So, from Sunni perspective, no, Ali wasn't involved in the deposition of the Uthman. Yeah, I said previously Abu Bakr, Uthman, who is meant. But yeah, like I think that's just Sunni fantasy, to be honest, because so much tradition just disqualified even from the Ibadi, and this is like the third group within Islam, Ibadiyya, which predominant in the Amman and the Sultanate of Amman, which clearly portrays the picture that, yeah, Ali was involved, and it was very brutal. All this violent warfare between the first so-called Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs. And the problem, of course, we don't have any epigraphic evidence for the Rashidun. That's I think the biggest problem. Like, could you imagine the figures of Islam, which were from the classical viewpoint, ruling from the basically the North Africa to the Chinese borders, don't have any coins minted with their names. That's, of course, hard to swallow, I guess. But yeah, and this Bogomils, they rejected the priestly authority and rejected the idea of mediation. Some scholars even maintain the idea that Bogomilism was like this alpha version of Protestant Reformation, that it was a predecessor of what will happen later on after the 500 years, with the rejection of the church authorities by the Protestant leaders. Yeah, because church is the demonic and Pope is the Antichrist, right? It's classic position of
Yep.
the Luther,
100%.
Calvin, Zwingli, and so on.
Yes, indeed. So here, maybe we'll hit up some comments here. So we have our friend spiritual level of being. Let's see. Yeah, I saw his channel is growing pretty quickly. And so yeah, he did a video on Messalians not too long ago. Yeah,
you might wonder why nobody discussing them, because you basically have the early Christian group which rejected the church authority. You may wonder why they are not discussed.
yeah, just like Manichaeism, not Manichaean. Well, both Manichaeism is what I
Yeah.
admit, but
And Mandaeanism,
yeah,
because who was this guy who did the translation of the Mandaean Book of John? James McGrath, I guess, if I'm not butchering his name, but he pointed out this nonsense. Like, their writings were basically open since the 18th century, and like
mhm,
nobody looking, like, oh no, they
yeah,
just because they reject Jesus, you must not look into them, because it raised certain problematic aspect of the early Christianity,
yeah, and
obviously.
it's something is going on. Like somebody's borrowing from the other. So like
Yeah,
the hymn of the pearl.
yeah,
It's one of them is between what is it the book of John the Baptist or something like that. I forget which Mendean work it was, but it's just like Hymn of the Pearl. So somebody has a copyright suit. Somebody's
yeah. I would put up on Mandeans because Mandean is a Mesopotamian religion, and this whole notion of the pearl was prevalent even before the Mandeanism in Mesopotamian context. So
yeah,
at least it certainly arose from the Mesopotamia. We can guess, and Byzantine Christianity wasn't the Mesopotamian religion; it's a Byzantine religion, which borrowed many aspects from the Roman religion, and which is not bad. I'm not just criticizing, but you need to be open to other traditions which are geographically distinct from yours and not just try to say that they're filthy heretics who should burn in hell. Yeah.
yep, indeed. And then here we have Justa. This has become one of my latest favorite channels. Excellent research, but thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, it's
And
about my channel, I guess.
yeah, it's too bad. It said, well, one thing it says this, so we don't know which channel is being referred to, but I would imagine it's this channel, but I don't know. Maybe it's Gnostic channel. Is becoming one of. What do you mean one? It should be in one of my latest favorite. It should be. This is my favorite channel. It should say Brave New History is my favorite channel. Then there would be no ambiguity, but what can you do?
Do you
And
know?
do you know anything about Alawiism? I've heard there's a Muslim group that believe Ali was God in the flesh. I was thinking about studying into them. Yeah, I did an interview with an Alawite. And actually,
Well,
I'm working on future ones about Alawiism. But when I
you
interviewed
will
him,
you would be joining somebody from Alawi's or with the same guy?
maybe either, right? I'm looking. It would be neat to have like a hereditary Alawite, because some of it, like it's different. It's not like a monolithic
Yeah,
thing. There's
it's like
some groups you can convert to, and then others is just like no conversion. It's just us. You
it's
can't.
like it's like Druze, something like that.
Yeah, but it's kind of like I don't know. Different people have different things like that, but with modern Eloise, so I've heard, or at least the one guy that I interviewed, you can convert to it, and he was a convert. And they also have gotten away from this. They still revere Ali,
Mm.
but he's been demoted. He's not a god anymore. Like they've
Well,
reformed him.
I heard from some Shia guys from my Discord group that you should not use the past tense that believed Ali was God in flesh. They actually believed that Ali was God in flesh. And
Well,
Ali
they used
stands
to.
from the some sort of higher God, whilst Muhammad is the lower God.
Well, like so what he described is they to control a video device. Oh geez, somebody thinks I'm talking to her. Go to settings. I don't know what I said that made it sound like the name that starts with an A, but um he was saying like there's like the main guy and he's actually not that prominent. So like everybody has a triad, and
I
Ali
post,
was like,
yeah, I posted recently the conscript from a wonderful article by Daniel De Smet, the city of Kufa, the birthplace of Shiism, and he actually relates some interesting tradition about this Hulat extremists, which Alawites would be just descendants of this radical Shia groups in the veneration of imams. Those, and I quote the article, those, the Imami theologian native from Kufa, Hisham ibn al-Hakam, has transmitted the following tradition from the sixth Imam Jafar al-Sadiq about Bayan ibn Sam'an, an extremist, executed in Kufa in 737. I said to Jafar al-Sadiq, Bayan understood the verse, and it is he who in heaven is God, and in earth is God, as if the one in earth is different from the God in the heaven, and the God in the heaven is different from the God in the earth. The God in the heaven is mightier than the God in the earth, and the inhabitants of the earth know the immanence of the God in heaven and worship him. So we already see the two powers in
"Where's that
heaven.
from?"
This is just one of the hadith, I guess, from Shia corpus. It's most probably.
That is wild.
Yeah, and there's what was that also? I don't remember. There is the idea of the, or how it was, I don't remember, that they would use the actually Kul Huwallahu Ahad, the Suratul Ikhlas, that he is not, he does not beget, he is not begotten, to this demiurgical figure, which in that case would be
Mhm.
Muhammad, and Ali would be this higher God, and which is quite obviously why, because Ali means the elevated one, or the one who is above. Aliyun.
Yeah. So here, if anybody wants to hop on, or if spiritual level of being, if you want to hop on and want to add anything, I put the link if you want to join us in the chat. If you have anything to add
Yeah.
about the Salians, you can. But yeah, I'm not terribly familiar with Shia
Yeah.
Hadith, but that is wild that they would
Yeah,
have about a
when
God
you,
living on
yeah,
earth.
when you start actually reading early Shia theology, you definitely think that the whole beef between the Sunnism and Shiism wasn't only about the politics, it was also about the theology. And obviously, that is very problematic for the Sunni brothers. They want to portray the conflict as the political one. Because if you delve deep into this kind of a mess of Shia tradition, you would think that this guy lives in a different universe from the theological spectrum. And I made a video about the Kitab, and this is an early Shia Ghulat, again, this extremist treatise about cosmology of this group, of these radicals. That's just a pure other universe, to be honest. They just believe that first and foremost, Iblis is identified with Azazil. And that's what you see in Enochian tradition, where Azazil is the fallen angel. Yeah, and there's the idea of the multiple covenants in the Kitab. There is a strong parallels with the Apocryphon of John. And we discussed it with you actually about, if you remember, the plot of Timaeus almost identical formulation of creation of the human body. You see exactly like this stuff, both in Apocryphon and in the Kitab. And what is interesting, both Apocryphon of John and Kitab identified the creation, or at least certain parts of body, with divine aeons, with a specific divine mediator figures. And in Arabic, they spelled like uluhiyat, rububiyat, but in Apocryphon, obviously, it's written in Greek, and there is some correspondence that, for example, this uluhiyat, which means the divine presence, the sphere of the divine presence, is identified with the Apocryphon goodness, and it stands for the bones, as far as I know, for the specific part of the body. And in Arabic, it would be like malakutiyat, but in Apocryphon of John, it would be kingdom. So definitely, we're dealing with some sort of a tradition, both tradition, Arabic and this Greek. Arabic, I mean Quran, and Apocryphon of John, which stems from some proto source, I guess, or maybe it's actually development of this Apocryphon of John tradition, if it's possible, through some mediator scripture, possibly in Syriac, I guess, or something like that, because in Syriac it would be just translated in similar fashion from the Greek sources. Yeah, so the weird stuff, like if you have some text like this which correspond to the Nag Hammadi library, fishy stuff is going on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how everybody seems to borrow from Timaeus,
yeah, that
and
way
the Gnostics especially enjoyed it. And yeah, it's one.
Godfather the Plato. So you can't evade the Plato when you're dealing with when you're dealing with the whole Abrahamic relations. To be honest, like all this is anti-Hellenistic Judaism. What kind of nonsense is that? Like everything, Torah itself, yeah, parts of it can be just stemming from the Timaeus. Yeah, and the whole Muslim tradition would be just circling around the plate of Flatun, right? How is it spelled in Arabic? Sheikh al-Awwal, he's also called the first Sheikh. Yeah, it's just understudy. I think that there is a lot of bigotry in the academia, that we almost everything must be about the Sunni tradition. And when we are actually dealing with the historiography, because that's the different topic, okay, if we study theology or religion, we may at least follow some religious pattern, in that case Sunnis. But when we're dealing with the historicity of specific religion, we can't just ignore the Shia tradition just because Sunni religious circles doesn't like that. It's not how it should work in academia, I think. But yeah.
All right, very good. Maybe we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
And yeah, stay tuned. Thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Gnostic Quran, for telling us about the
Messalians.
Messalians. Yeah. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching, and then we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Until next time.
Yep.